At exactly 1:47 a.m., the pounding on my front door shook the entire house. Not a polite knock. Not the hesitant tap of a worried neighbor. It sounded like someone intended to tear the door off its hinges. Before I could reach the hallway, powerful flashlights pierced through my front windows, sweeping across the walls of my living room. Red and blue lights reflected off every framed photograph I'd spent 22 years collecting from army assignments around the world. Then came the command. CID opened the door. I didn't move. I already knew they weren't leaving. The next sound was the metallic snap of a battering ram striking the frame. The door burst inward. 7 Criminal Investigation Division agents flooded into my house in tactical gear, weapons lowered but ready. The lead agent held up a thick folder bearing a federal seal. Colonel Evelyn Parker. Yes, he looked almost uncomfortable. Ma'am, we have a federal warrant. Another agent stepped beside him. You're under arrest for unauthorized disclosure of classified intelligence. For a brief moment, everything became perfectly quiet. Not because I was shocked. Because I recognized the accusation immediately. Someone hadn't merely tried to ruin my career. Someone had carefully planned to destroy my life. I slowly held out my hands. I won't resist. The steel cuffs clicked around my wrists. Then I noticed the people standing at the end of my driveway. My mother-in-law, Nancy Whitmore. She wasn't crying. She wasn't confused. She was smiling. Beside her stood my sister-in-law, Melissa, holding her phone high above the crowd. Its screen glowed brightly in the darkness. She wasn't calling for help. She was live streaming. There she is, Melissa shouted toward the camera. I told everyone she wasn't the hero she pretended to be. The comments rolled across her screen so quickly they looked like rushing water. Traitor. Lock her up. I knew she was fake. Military corruption. Justice. Within seconds I realized tens of thousands of people were already watching. By the time the agents placed me into the SUV, Melissa laughed. We're over 1 million viewers. My husband, Daniel, stood several feet behind them. He never looked me in the eyes. That hurt far more than the handcuffs. Not once did he ask the agents if there had been a mistake. Not once did he say my name. 23 years of marriage. Reduced to silence. As the vehicle pulled away, I looked back only once. Nancy wrapped one arm around Daniel's shoulders. Melissa turned the phone toward herself, smiling like she'd just won the lottery. That image stayed with me during the entire drive to CID Headquarters. Oddly enough, I wasn't afraid. Not because I believed everything would work out. Because I'd spent more than 2 decades inside military intelligence. I understood investigations. Evidence mattered. Facts mattered. Truth eventually mattered. Or at least, it was supposed to. The processing room at CID Headquarters looked exactly as I remembered from dozens of professional visits over the years. Gray walls. Bright fluorescent lights. Metal tables. Everything smelled faintly of coffee and printer toner. No one spoke much. The agents remained professional. Respectful. Almost unusually respectful. They photographed me, collected my belongings, logged my Pentagon credentials. One young investigator paused while holding my identification badge. He stared at it for a second longer than expected, then handed it to another agent. No one explained why. I waited. Nearly 40 minutes passed before another investigator entered carrying a thick personnel file. My personnel file. The complete military record of Colonel Evelyn Parker. He placed it on the table, opened it. Started reading. His eyes moved quickly down the first page, then the second. Then, he stopped. Completely. He didn't blink. He didn't ask another question. He simply stared at the papers as though they'd suddenly become impossible to understand. The room grew strangely quiet. Another investigator noticed. You okay? The man never answered. Instead, he slowly closed the folder, looked directly at me, then quietly stood. Without saying a single word, he walked out. I heard footsteps disappear down the hallway. A few seconds later, a telephone rang somewhere beyond the closed door. Muted voices followed. One voice, then another. Someone speaking faster now. The investigators inside the room exchanged confused glances. No one explained anything. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. No one questioned me. No one accused me of anything else. The atmosphere had changed so completely it almost felt like everyone had forgotten why I was there. Finally, the hallway outside became busy. Several sets of footsteps approached. Someone straightened their uniform. The door opened. A lieutenant colonel entered first. He looked around the room without speaking, then stepped aside. Behind him walked a man I recognized immediately. Major General Thomas Grayson, a 2-star general, one of the most respected intelligence commanders in the Army. He wasn't supposed to know who I was. Certainly not at nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. Every investigator in the room stood at attention. The general ignored them. He walked directly toward me, stopped less than 3 feet away, looked straight into my eyes. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't suspicious. If anything, he looked deeply unsettled. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. The room was so silent I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Then he took a slow breath, lowered his voice, and said only 6 words. "Ma'am, you're—" He stopped, as though the rest of the sentence simply wouldn't come. In 22 years wearing the uniform, I had never seen a general struggle to speak. At that exact moment, I realized something far more frightening than my arrest. Whatever the man had just discovered inside my personnel file, none of the people who had celebrated my downfall, not my mother-in-law, not Melissa, not even my husband, had any idea what was about to happen next. Major General Thomas Grayson never finished his sentence. Instead, he looked toward the CID investigators gathered around the room. "I'd like a moment alone." No one questioned the order. Within seconds, every agent quietly filed out of the interview room. The heavy door clicked shut behind them, leaving only the general and me under the harsh fluorescent lights. He remained standing. I remained seated, my wrists still cuffed to the steel ring attached to the table. For nearly half a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, he pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "You don't owe me anything yet, General." His jaw tightened. "No, but I may before this is over." He rested one hand on my personnel file. "I've reviewed your record." I assumed someone eventually would. "I also reviewed your operational history." I simply nodded. Most of that history wasn't classified anymore, but much of it had never been discussed outside official channels. "I have one question," he continued. "Go ahead." "If you knew these allegations were coming—" "I didn't." "Why didn't you call anyone?" I smiled for the first time that night. "Because innocent people shouldn't need favors." He studied my face. "You still believe that?" "I've spent 22 years teaching younger officers that integrity means trusting the system even when the system scares you." He leaned back. "I hope the system deserves that trust." "So do I." The general closed the file. "I'm removing myself from this interview." I raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual." "It is." "Why?" "Because after reading your record, I believe someone is going to ask very difficult questions about how this investigation began." He stood. "The investigation continues. So does my arrest. For now." He hesitated before reaching the door. "Colonel Parker." "Yes, sir." "I suggest you start thinking about who benefits from seeing you destroyed." Then he walked away. The lock clicked behind him. His words echoed in my mind. Who benefits? The answer came almost immediately. My husband's family. Not because they hated the army, because they hated what my career represented. Success. Respect. Independence. Everything, oddly enough, had been different when Daniel and I first met. It was the summer of 2001. I had just returned from a long overseas assignment and stopped at a small veterans fundraiser outside Alexandria, Virginia. Daniel wasn't military. He owned a modest construction company. He laughed easily, listened more than he talked. He never acted intimidated by my uniform. That alone made him different. Our first date lasted nearly 5 hours. Our second lasted even longer. A year later, we were married beneath enormous oak trees in a quiet Virginia park, surrounded by friends, fellow soldiers, and both of our families. His mother hugged me that day. "I'm proud my son found someone who serves this country." I believed her. For several years. I had no reason not to. Whenever deployment separated us, Daniel mailed handwritten letters instead of quick emails. Nancy baked cookies for my unit every Christmas. Melissa posted photographs online calling me our family's hero. Looking back now, I wonder if those smiles were ever genuine, or if they only existed while my career seemed ordinary. The first cracks appeared after my promotion to lieutenant colonel. The promotion brought more responsibility, longer hours, occasional classified assignments that I couldn't discuss at home. Daniel understood. Nancy didn't. She began making little comments. "You military people think you're better than everyone else. I suppose national security is more important than family dinners. I hope all those medals keep you warm when you're old." I laughed them off. She didn't. The comments became sharper every year. Melissa changed too. She had discovered social media. At first she posted cooking videos, then family gossip. Eventually she built an audience by mocking other people. Embarrassing strangers became entertainment. She loved attention. Didn't matter whether it came from admiration or outrage. Attention paid the bills. Daniel always excused her. "That's just Melissa." Maybe, but just Melissa slowly became someone who recorded every holiday dinner without asking. Someone who secretly photographed private conversations. Someone who believed every family disagreement deserved an audience. I hated it. Nancy loved it. She's building a business. No, I answered once. She's building one mistake after another. Melissa overheard me. She never forgot it. The real turning point came 2 years before my arrest. I was promoted again. Colonel! After the ceremony, dozens of soldiers congratulated me. Daniel smiled proudly. Nancy barely clapped. Later that evening, she cornered me in my own kitchen. I suppose you're the important one now. I've never thought that. You don't have to say it. Nancy, my son sacrifices for this family too. I know he does. But nobody salutes him. There it was. Not anger. Jealousy. Deep, quiet jealousy. From that day forward, family gatherings became competitions I never entered. Every promotion was called luck. Every award became politics. Every deployment became an excuse to question my loyalty to the family. Daniel hated conflict. Unfortunately, avoiding conflict isn't the same as solving it. He would change the subject, laugh nervously, suggest dessert, anything except tell his mother to stop. Each time he remained silent. Nancy became a little bolder. Melissa became a little louder. And I became a little lonelier. Still, I never imagined either of them capable of destroying my career. The anonymous allegation reached CID nearly 3 months before my arrest. I wouldn't learn that until much later. According to investigators, someone claimed I had removed classified intelligence from a secure system and shared it outside authorized channels. The report included details that sounded convincing. Dates, locations, technical language, enough information to justify opening a formal investigation. Someone had clearly done their homework. The complaint wasn't written by a random internet troll. It came from someone who had spent time close enough to observe pieces of my professional life without fully understanding them. Someone who had watched, listened, and filled in the gaps with dangerous assumptions or deliberate lies. Back in the present alone inside the interview room, I replayed every conversation I'd had over the previous few years. Every uncomfortable dinner, every sarcastic joke, every moment Melissa pointed a camera in my direction. Every time Nancy asked questions about work that I politely refused to answer. Then another memory surfaced. 3 months earlier, Sunday dinner. I'd left my home office for less than 10 minutes to help Daniel outside. When I returned, Melissa had been standing inside my office doorway, holding her phone. She smiled. I was just looking for the bathroom. At the time, I believed her. Sitting in CID headquarters that night, I wasn't so sure anymore. Outside the interview room, I heard hurried footsteps again. Voices. One of them sounded tense. Then another. Somewhere beyond the hallway, a phone rang. And for reasons I couldn't yet explain, I had the unmistakable feeling the investigation was no longer moving toward proving my guilt. It was beginning to ask whether someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to manufacture it. The morning after my arrest began without a sunrise, at least not one I could see. The interview room at CID headquarters had no windows, only pale gray walls, and a clock that ticked loudly enough to remind everyone that time was moving even when it felt frozen. A young military police officer entered carrying a paper cup. "Coffee, ma'am." I looked up. "You don't have to call me ma'am." He gave a small, awkward smile. "It's habit." He placed the cup in front of me. "Thank you." He hesitated before leaving. "For what it's worth." He lowered his voice. "None of this feels right." Then he quietly closed the door behind him. That sentence stayed with me. None of this feels right. It wasn't evidence. It wasn't proof. But it told me something important. The people actually investigating me weren't behaving like they had already decided I was guilty. Around 8 o'clock, 2 CID investigators entered together. I recognized one from the previous night, Special Agent Brian Keller. Across the Army, he had a reputation for being relentless. Fair, but relentless. He sat down, opened a notebook, and looked directly at me. "Colonel Parker, we're going to ask you the same questions you've already answered." "I assumed you would. It isn't personal." "I know." He clicked his pen. "Did you ever remove classified intelligence from a secure government system?" "No." "Did you ever transmit classified material to anyone without authorization?" "No." "Did you ever allow an unauthorized civilian access to classified information?" "No." His questions continued for nearly an hour. Every answer remained exactly the same. No hesitation. No contradictions. No guessing. Finally, Keller closed his notebook. "You've been remarkably consistent. Because the truth doesn't require rehearsal." For the first time, he smiled. Only slightly, but enough for me to notice. After they left, I waited. Around lunchtime, voices began echoing through the hallway. Not loud. Urgent. Doors opened. Closed. Someone walked quickly past my room carrying several evidence boxes. Another investigator hurried by holding what looked like security access logs. Something had changed. I didn't know what, but I could feel it. Late that afternoon, the door opened again. This time, Major General Grayson entered with Agent Keller. Neither man sat immediately. Grayson folded his arms. "Colonel?" "Sir, we've uncovered several inconsistencies." I remained silent. He continued. "The timeline provided in the anonymous complaint doesn't match your building access records." I wasn't surprised. "It also doesn't match surveillance footage." Keller placed several photographs on the table. Security camera stills. One showed me entering the Pentagon at 7:12 a.m. Another showed me leaving at 6:41 p.m. Every movement was documented. Every entry required biometric authentication. Every exit was logged. Keller tapped one photograph. "The complaint states classified files were copied during a period when you weren't even inside the building." I leaned forward. "So someone guessed, or assumed no one would verify." He slid another document across the table. "This is where it gets interesting." It was a digital access report. Someone had attempted to log into my secure workstation. 3 separate times. The attempts all failed. The timestamps caught my attention immediately. Sunday afternoon. 3 months earlier. I frowned. I wasn't working that weekend. "We know." "So who was—" Keller looked at me carefully. "That's what we're trying to determine." Another photograph appeared. This one wasn't from the Pentagon. It was from my neighborhood. A residential security camera. The date. The same Sunday. The camera showed Daniel's pickup truck parked outside our house. 2 more vehicles sat behind it. Nancy's SUV. Melissa's compact sedan. I stared at the image. Family dinner. I remembered every detail. Barbecue. Apple pie. Daniel burning the hamburgers. Melissa filming everyone without permission. Then, my home office. I looked back at Keller. "Someone entered my office." He nodded. "We believe so." I came back and found Melissa standing there. "Did she have permission?" "No." "What did she say?" "She claimed she was looking for the bathroom." Grayson exchanged a glance with Keller. Neither spoke. Instead, Keller opened another folder. "This photograph came from your home's exterior security camera. I hadn't even realized investigators had obtained it. The image showed me walking outside with Daniel. Timestamp, 4:16 p.m. Another image. 4 minutes later. Melissa walking alone toward the hallway leading to my office. Then another. She disappeared from camera view. 7 minutes. No footage inside the hallway. Only entrances and exits. Finally, another frame. Melissa emerging. Holding her cell phone. Looking over her shoulder before rejoining everyone outside. A knot formed in my stomach. I knew something felt wrong. "We're not finished," Keller said. He opened one final folder. Inside were forensic reports from Army cyber specialists. The anonymous complaint included screenshots. "So, they're authentic." I blinked. "What? The screenshots themselves weren't edited." That didn't make sense. "Then how—" "They're authentic screenshots." He paused. "Of publicly available training material." I stared at him. He continued. "Someone copied images from Army cybersecurity training manuals and claimed they came from classified systems." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. They didn't even steal real classified images. No. They used training slides. Yes. The room fell quiet again. Grayson shook his head. Someone understood military terminology just well enough to sound convincing, but not well enough to fool professionals. Exactly. That explained why the first investigator had frozen after opening my file. He hadn't discovered I was secretly important. He'd discovered something didn't add up. Someone had gone to enormous lengths to fabricate a believable accusation. But whoever built the lie had misunderstood one crucial fact. Military records verify almost everything. Computer access, building entry, training, assignments, security credentials. Nothing exists in isolation. One false detail eventually exposes another. Keller leaned back. "We've also reviewed the live stream. My sister-in-law's, every minute of it." I frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" He reached for his notebook. "Colonel, before CID publicly announced the specific allegation, your sister-in-law told over 1 million viewers you had leaked classified intelligence." I looked up sharply. She said that before the arrest was announced, nearly 4 minutes before, neither of us spoke. 4 minutes. Only investigators. And whoever filed the complaint should have known the exact accusation before the arrest team arrived. Grayson slowly exhaled. "That's impossible." Keller nodded. "It should be." I suddenly understood why everyone outside my interview room sounded so tense. The investigation was no longer centered on me. It had quietly turned toward someone else. Someone who seemed to know far more than an innocent family member ever should. As the meeting ended, Keller gathered the files. Before leaving, he stopped beside the door. "We're requesting search warrants." "For what?" He met my eyes. Phones, computers, and every digital device belonging to your mother-in-law. He paused. And your sister-in-law. The door closed behind them. For the first time since those handcuffs clicked around my wrists, I wasn't wondering whether my life would survive this nightmare. I was wondering how far Nancy and Melissa had gone, before they ever imagined someone would start asking questions. The search warrants were signed before sunrise. I didn't know that until much later. At the time, all I knew was that CID Headquarters had become unusually quiet. Not relaxed, focused. The kind of silence I'd experienced before major operations overseas when everyone stopped talking because every decision suddenly mattered. Around 9 that morning, Agent Brian Keller returned to the interview room. This time he wasn't carrying questions. He was carrying answers. He sat across from me, placed a thick evidence binder on the table, and folded his hands. Colonel Parker. Agent, I'd like to explain where this investigation stands. I nodded. I'm listening. He opened the binder. Our cyber unit executed emergency warrants early this morning. My mother-in-law, her home. My sister-in-law, her apartment. My husband. We searched every digital device registered to the residence you shared. I swallowed quietly. Daniel, whatever happened next, his life was about to change forever. Keller turned the first page. The initial forensic review recovered deleted messages. Deleted doesn't always mean gone. No. He looked almost impressed. It usually doesn't. The first screenshots showed a group text. Participants: Nancy, Melissa, Daniel. The messages began almost 5 months earlier. At first, they looked harmless. Complaints about family dinners. Comments about my work schedule. Nancy wrote, "She cares more about the army than her own family." Melissa replied, "People think she's some kind of hero." Then, the conversation changed. One message made my stomach tighten. If she loses that clearance, she'll lose everything. No one responded for nearly 6 hours. Then Melissa answered, "Leave that to me." I closed my eyes, not because I was surprised, because seeing it in writing made it real. Keller turned another page. There are hundreds of messages. He wasn't exaggerating. Weeks of conversations, planning, complaining, speculating. Nancy repeatedly insisted I thought I was better than everyone. Melissa became increasingly obsessed with embarrassing me publicly. She constantly talked about how much attention a military scandal would generate online. One message chilled me more than all the others. Melissa wrote, "Imagine if the whole country watched her get arrested." Nancy answered, "She deserves it." I felt something inside me break. Not anger, not revenge, grief. This wasn't an argument that had spiraled out of control. It was a campaign, months of resentment, carefully fed until it became something dangerous. I looked up. "What about Daniel?" Keller took a slow breath. "He never discussed fabricating evidence." My shoulders relaxed slightly. But that single word stopped me. He repeatedly ignored conversations suggesting something illegal might happen. I looked away. Daniel had always believed avoiding conflict made him a peacemaker. Instead, it had made him a bystander. Keller continued, "We don't believe he knew the full plan, but he knew enough to ask questions." Yes, and he never did. No. Silence settled between us. Sometimes betrayal doesn't happen because someone attacks you. Sometimes it happens because someone refuses to protect you. Late that afternoon, investigators began reconstructing the timeline. Every movement, every phone call, every text message, every internet search. Melissa's phone revealed something unexpected. Dozens of searches. How to report military misconduct anonymously. CID investigation process. Federal warrants. Military espionage penalties. Can civilians report classified crimes? How long does a military investigation take? She hadn't simply acted out of emotion. She had researched everything. She wanted the accusation to look believable. Then came the search history that changed the case. Army cybersecurity training images, public military intelligence manuals, download training presentation. The screenshots used in the anonymous complaint had come directly from publicly available instructional material, exactly as CID's cyber specialists suspected. She hadn't hacked anything. She had copied educational material and falsely labeled it as classified evidence. Meanwhile, Nancy's phone revealed something equally damaging. A voice recording. She had accidentally saved it instead of deleting it. The recording lasted less than 2 minutes. Melissa laughed. "Once they arrest her, nobody will care whether she's innocent." Nancy laughed too. People always remember the accusation. Neither woman realized they had just described the entire plan. Public humiliation. Permanent damage. Truth later. Maybe, maybe not. Keller closed the tablet. "I've worked fraud investigations for 17 years. And I've rarely seen jealousy become this organized. Neither had I. That evening, another development unfolded. Daniel requested permission to speak with investigators voluntarily. I wasn't present, but Keller later told me what happened. Daniel arrived looking exhausted. He hadn't slept. He asked only one question before the interview began. "Is my wife really guilty?" Keller answered honestly. "We're still investigating." Daniel lowered his head. "I should have asked that yesterday." Then he cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a man realizing he had trusted the wrong people for far too long. He admitted something investigators hadn't known. 3 months earlier, during that family barbecue, Melissa had asked to borrow his office key. She claimed she wanted to charge her phone away from the children playing outside. Daniel handed it to her without thinking. "He never told me." Because he forgot, or thought it didn't matter. It mattered. Very much. That single decision gave investigators the missing piece. Melissa hadn't wandered into my office by accident. She had planned to enter it before she ever arrived. As investigators continued examining digital records, another surprise surfaced. Melissa's Livestream analytics. She had scheduled the broadcast nearly 12 hours before the arrest. Not minutes, hours. The title had already been saved. Army Colonel exposed. She had expected my humiliation before CID agents even knocked on my door. That alone demonstrated something critical. She wasn't reacting to an arrest. She was anticipating one. Keller later described the moment every investigator realized the case had completely changed. Nobody cheered. Nobody celebrated. One young agent simply leaned back and quietly said, "We've been investigating the wrong person." The room reportedly fell silent. Not because anyone felt embarrassed, because everyone understood what came next. The investigation was no longer about whether I had leaked classified intelligence. It was about whether 2 civilians had deliberately manipulated federal investigators into launching a false national security case. Those were very different crimes. As evening approached, Major General Thomas Grayson returned. He stood outside my interview room for a moment before entering. His expression looked calmer than the night before. "Colonel, sir, I wanted to tell you this personally." I waited. "The evidence is moving rapidly in your favor." I nodded. "I appreciate that, but we're not finished." "I know." He looked directly at me. "There are still several interviews to conduct." "With Nancy?" "Yes. And Melissa?" "Yes." He paused. "And tomorrow?" His voice became noticeably more serious. "We're bringing them both to CID Headquarters. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't wondering whether the truth would come out. I was wondering how my mother-in-law and sister-in-law would explain months of planning. Once they realized every deleted message, every search, every recording, and every live stream had followed them straight into the interrogation room. The next morning, I watched through the narrow observation window as my mother-in-law walked into CID Headquarters with the same confidence she'd worn the night I was arrested. Nancy Whitmore looked immaculate. Cream-colored blazer, perfect hair, pearl earrings. If someone had seen her in the lobby, they would have mistaken her for a respected community volunteer instead of the woman at the center of a federal investigation. Melissa arrived 20 minutes later. She was different. Her confidence had faded. She kept checking her phone, probably wondering why her livestream audience had suddenly turned against her overnight. The internet had done what it always does. It had moved on, except this time the truth was beginning to catch up. Agent Brian Keller met them separately. No shared interview. No opportunity to coordinate stories. No whispered reminders. No excuses. Just evidence. One person at a time. I wasn't allowed inside either interview room, but later, after everything became part of the official record, Keller walked me through what had happened. Nancy entered first. She smiled politely. "I assume this won't take long." Keller didn't smile back. "It depends on how honest you intend to be." She folded her hands. "I've always been honest." He slid a printed copy of her text messages across the table. The smile disappeared. "Would you like to explain this conversation?" Nancy barely looked at the page. "I don't remember sending those." "We recovered them from your phone. They could have been altered." Our digital forensics laboratory confirmed they weren't. She shifted in her chair. For the first time, she looked uncomfortable. Keller calmly placed another document in front of her. The audio transcript. Nancy recognized it immediately. Her face turned pale. That recording was private. It became evidence the moment it related to a federal criminal investigation. She stopped talking. Meanwhile, 2 doors down the hallway, Melissa was trying a completely different strategy. She denied everything. The screenshots weren't mine. CID showed her download history. I didn't know they were training materials. CID showed her internet searches. I never expected anyone to get arrested. CID showed her scheduled livestream. She stared at the screen without speaking. Then Keller asked a question no one had prepared her for. Why did your live stream title say Army Colonel Exposed 12 hours before Colonel Parker was arrested? Melissa blinked. You uploaded that title before CID executed the warrant. I guessed. You guessed the exact timing? Silence. You guessed the exact allegation. More silence. You guessed we'd arrive before 2 o'clock in the morning. Melissa looked at the table. For nearly 30 seconds, no one said anything. Finally, she whispered. My mom said it would happen. That single sentence changed everything. Not because it proved every detail. Because it confirmed coordination. The interviews continued throughout the afternoon. Eventually Daniel arrived. This time not as a witness. As a husband carrying more regret than anyone should have to bear. When Keller asked why he had never defended me, Daniel didn't try to make excuses. I thought my mother was dramatic. He swallowed hard. I never thought she'd become dangerous. Why didn't you believe your wife? I believed everyone except the one person who had never lied to me. Those words hurt. Not because they were cruel, because they were true. Late that afternoon, Major General Thomas Grayson convened a formal briefing inside a secure conference room. Present were CID leadership Army legal advisors, senior intelligence officers, and several officials from the Department of the Army. I remained seated quietly near the back. General Grayson stood. Ladies and gentlemen, he paused before continuing. The evidence no longer supports the allegation against Colonel Evelyn Parker. The room remained silent. Our investigation has found no evidence that Colonel Parker leaked classified intelligence. He looked toward CID Director Colonel James Foster. Colonel Foster. Foster stood. Our digital forensic teams confirmed every alleged piece of classified evidence originated from publicly available Army training materials. Another officer displayed the timeline. Every entry, every phone call, every deleted message, every access log, every surveillance image, everything fit together. Everything except the accusation against me, General Grayson continued. Evidence instead indicates a coordinated effort to fabricate allegations using publicly available material personal access to Colonel Parker's residence and anonymous reporting procedures. No one interrupted. No one questioned the findings. The facts spoke for themselves. Then something happened I will never forget. General Grayson walked across the room until he stood directly in front of me. Every officer present watched. He looked me in the eyes. Then in full view of everyone there, he rendered a hand salute. I immediately stood and returned it. His voice was steady. Colonel Parker, I'm sorry. Not just for the arrest, not just for the investigation, for what it had cost. My reputation, my marriage, my peace. The room remained completely still, because everyone understood that apologies carry unusual weight inside the military, especially when offered by a general officer. The legal process against Nancy and Melissa continued after that day. False statements to federal investigators, evidence tampering, obstruction. Other charges would be determined by civilian prosecutors. That wasn't my decision. It never would be. Justice belongs to the law. Revenge belongs to anger. I had carried enough anger already. As for Daniel, he asked to see me before I left CID Headquarters. We sat together in a quiet visitor's room. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, he broke the silence. I failed you. I looked down at my wedding ring. You did. I don't expect forgiveness. I know. His voice cracked. I should have been standing beside you that night. I nodded slowly. Instead, you stood beside the people accusing me. He covered his face with both hands. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. So would I. Not because I wanted him to suffer. Because trust once broken never returns exactly the way it was. As I walked out of CID Headquarters that evening, reporters waited behind security barriers. Some recognized me. Some shouted questions. Others simply watched. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. The truth had finally begun speaking for itself. And unlike lies, it didn't require a camera, or a live stream, or a million strangers cheering from behind a screen. It only required patience. Sometimes that's the hardest kind of courage. 3 weeks after my name was officially cleared, I stood in my backyard with a cup of coffee listening to birds instead of reporters. It was the first peaceful morning I'd had in months. The television trucks were gone. The internet had moved on to another scandal. The headlines had faded. But life doesn't magically return to normal just because the news cycle changes. Some wounds heal slowly. Others leave scars. The Army offered me administrative leave while everything settled, but I declined. After 22 years in uniform, routine had always been my anchor. I wanted to work. Not because I needed to prove anything. Because serving had never been about recognition. It had always been about purpose. The first morning I walked back into the Pentagon, I expected awkward silence. Instead, I was greeted by something I hadn't anticipated. Respect. Not exaggerated. Not theatrical. Quiet. Sincere. One young captain stopped me outside the elevator. "Ma'am." "Yes?" "I just wanted to thank you." I smiled. "For what?" "For reminding a lot of us that integrity still matters." I wasn't sure how to answer that, so I simply said, "I hope you never have to prove yours the way I had to." He nodded thoughtfully before walking away. Those words stayed with me the rest of the day. Several weeks later, I received a new assignment. Not overseas, not another classified operation. Instead, Army leadership asked whether I would mentor newly promoted intelligence officers. At first, I almost laughed. Me, after everything that had happened. Then Major General Thomas Grayson called personally. "I believe you're exactly the person they need. I've become famous for being falsely arrested." "No," he answered immediately. "You've become known for remaining honorable when it would have been easier to become bitter." There was a difference. One I hadn't fully recognized until that moment. I accepted. Every Friday afternoon, I began meeting with groups of young officers preparing for greater responsibility. They asked about leadership, ethics, pressure, deployment, family. Eventually, someone always asked about the investigation. One lieutenant looked nervous as he raised his hand. "Ma'am." "Go ahead." "Were you angry?" I smiled. "Very." "How did you stop yourself from becoming consumed by it?" I thought for a long moment before answering. "Because anger can help you survive a difficult day." The room became quiet. "But it can't build a good life." Pens immediately started writing. I continued, "If you let bitterness become your identity, the people who hurt you continue controlling your future." No one spoke. They didn't need to. Sometimes silence means people are truly listening. As for the legal case, it concluded quietly several months later. Nancy accepted responsibility for knowingly providing false information during a federal investigation. Melissa admitted to fabricating supporting material and exploiting the arrest for financial gain through her online platforms. Neither sentence felt satisfying. Not because they escaped accountability, because no punishment could return what had been lost. Trust, marriage, family, those things don't come back through court orders. Daniel asked to meet me one final time. We chose a small park near the river where we'd once taken evening walks after we were newly married. 23 years earlier, we'd sat on the same bench planning our future. Now, we sat there discussing its ending. He looked older, not because of age, because regret changes people. I signed the divorce papers. "I know. They'll be finalized next week." I nodded quietly. "I don't blame you." "No, you shouldn't." We watched the water for several minutes. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "My mother calls every week?" I didn't answer. I haven't picked up. Still, I remained silent. I keep wondering how I became the man who stood there while they handcuffed my wife. I looked toward the river. "You didn't become that man overnight." He lowered his eyes. "No. It happened one small compromise at a time." He slowly nodded, looking away. "Yes." Saying nothing. "Yes. Choosing peace over truth." I finally looked at him. "And eventually forgetting the difference." Tears filled his eyes. "I'm sorry." "I know. That was enough." Forgiveness doesn't always mean rebuilding what was broken. Sometimes, it simply means refusing to carry hatred any longer. Before we stood to leave, Daniel surprised me. "I've started volunteering." "Where?" "A veterans housing program." I smiled. "They need good contractors." They also needed someone to remind me what service actually looks like. For the first time in many months, we both smiled. Not because everything had been repaired, because healing had finally begun. Separately, honestly, months later I received a handwritten letter. No return address. Inside was a single page. It came from one of the young officers I'd mentored. He wrote, "Ma'am, I almost cut corners on an investigation because everyone else believed the suspect was guilty. Then I remembered your story. We kept digging. The evidence proved the soldier innocent. Thank you for teaching me that facts deserve more patience than rumors." I folded the letter carefully, then placed it inside the same wooden box where I kept my Army medals. It belonged there, not because it was an award, because it reminded me why honor matters. Medals recognize moments, character shapes a lifetime. Today, when people ask me what the hardest part of the entire experience was, they usually expect me to mention the arrest, or the handcuffs, or seeing my sister-in-law celebrate while millions watched online. Those moments were painful, but they weren't the hardest. The hardest part was choosing not to let someone else's cruelty redefine the person I had spent a lifetime becoming. Anyone can believe a rumor. Anyone can join a crowd. Anyone can press the button that says share. It takes far more courage to wait for the truth. If there's one lesson I hope stays with you after hearing my story, it's this. Your reputation may be attacked. Your character may be questioned. People may judge you long before they know the facts. But integrity is built quietly, one decision at a time. And in the end, truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs time. If this story touched you, reminded you of someone who chose integrity over revenge, or encouraged you to keep believing in the truth even when it's difficult, I'd be honored if you shared it with someone who might need that reminder today. And if you'd like to hear more stories about resilience, justice, and hope, consider subscribing and joining me again. Thank you for spending this time with me. The end.